Camera number 437 is this 1978 offering from Leica, the R3 MOT electronic, diverging from their predominantly rangefinder cameras. Leica collaborated, it seems, with Minolta. They were struggling financially, and so they wanted a camera that would compete with the other 35mm cameras. And so this is the result, or rather the R3, which a couple of years before, 1976, was produced. And it's interesting looking at the advertisements for that camera of that time. It says here in this advert, the Leica that takes us into the 80s is the electronic Leica R3, the only 35mm camera with dual measuring mode for integrating and selective light metering. More about that a bit later on in the video. But the camera is electronic, as the name suggests, and so requires batteries to operate. So let's go ahead and put some batteries into the camera. So just before I put the two LR44 batteries into the camera that powers all the functions of the camera, when I first got the camera without batteries in it, I decided to just see if it had a manual mode. So putting it on one of the settings, and it seems to show signs of being mechanical, but when opening the film door, which I'll do now, we actually find that only one of the curtains is actually moving. So because it's a mechanical camera, because it's an electric camera rather, it obviously requires electricity to power the shutter. So there is no manual shutter speed, as it were, although that's not strictly true. If we put it on bulb, there we go, you can see that it actually does operate. So should the batteries fail, we can, let's just put that open up, we can operate the camera but on bulb mode. So how useful that is, well, depends on what we're using the camera for. So meanwhile, let's just put the batteries back into the camera. As I say, two LR44s. The only other things to mention on the base are the usual suspects. We have a tripod mount and the button that disconnects the film advance to allow us to rewind our film back into a canister. Now the thing that predominantly separates the R3 MOT electronic is the fact that you'll notice on the base there is provision for a motor wind, hence the reason it's called MOT, I presume. Otherwise the R3 is pretty much in evidence throughout the camera there. So let's look at the front of the camera, obviously predominated by the lens. So let's just take the lens off, which we do by pressing the lens release. Now this could be where it could get rather confusing, because Leica introduced a new lens mount, the R lens mount, and within that there are at least 5 other members of the family. There's 1 cam, 2 cam, 3 cam, R only, or ROM. This could be a very confusing video, so I'll try and keep it as simple as possible. For this particular camera, if you want to use this camera with all its features, you really need a 3 cam or an R only lens. You can use 1 cam and 2 cam lenses, but then you would need to perform stop-down metering. With a 3 cam and an R only lens, you benefit from the open aperture. While we've got the lenses, unfortunately, one of the reasons this camera was affordable to me was that it didn't have a Summicron or such lens. It actually had a Tamron lens with an adapter, and obviously Tamron had to reverse engineer, if you like, the 3 cam or 3rd cam here. And you'll see as I move it, well, it's rather, you will if I, there we go, you'll see that it opens and closes as that is rotated. And so what clearly happens here is that this armature in the camera, if If we just wind it up, we can show you that it actually lifts up when the mirror goes up. There we go. And so obviously that is connected with this armature in the lens, and that's what allows you to have open aperture. And so that's why, as I mentioned earlier, we need 3-cam or R-only lenses. I hope that's clear. If it's not, please say so in the video, or if you have an even clearer explanation, then please feel free to make a comment. Meanwhile, we have a stop-down lever that obviously moves that cam there with the aperture, and then our film release, our lens release, and then over the other side we have 2 flash ports, depending on what flash we're using. Okay, turning to the back, we have a film counter with another window above it that shows whether or not our film has actually been put on the take-up spool properly. So that's a nice feature. Obviously the camera being electrical needs to be turned on. That's on and that's off. And then the viewfinder has a blind. So if we were doing a long exposure or astrophotography, we can close that down. And then a window to show us our film. Putting the film in the camera is the usual process of lifting up the film rewind and then placing our cartridge into the camera. Notice there's no DX coding, we have to set that manually. Now in the viewfinder, I'll endeavour to take advantage of some advice given to me, use my phone, and then hopefully now you'll see an image of the viewfinder. You'll notice that on the right hand side there is the shutter speeds, and then above that on the very top we have 2 little windows, one that shows what mode we're in, auto or manual, and then our aperture is also shown in the window. In addition, because this, as we mentioned in the advert, there are 2 exposure modes, that's reflected in the viewfinder as well at the very top here, and we'll discuss that right now in fact. So let's come to the shutter dial. Shutter speeds go from 1/1000th of a second right down to bulb, and X for flash. I have a hot shoe there. But notice if we zoom in here, we have 2 of the light meter modes. The dot is the selective light measurement, and essentially the light is measured around the focus ring through the viewfinder. So in my lingo that seems to be center weighted metering, where emphasis is placed around that central focus point. But then if we press the button and slide the switch, we then get into the large field integrating measurement, which basically covers 80% of the view. So again, although not completely matrix metering, nonetheless it covers a large area of that. So it's really helpful to have those 2 light modes or exposure modes rather, in the camera. So moving on, we have our shutter actuation button. Oops. Turning on. And then also around the film advance, we have a lever that allows us to do double exposures, or multiple exposures should I say. The idea is that we advance the film, take the first image, and then slide the switch. This then cocks the film or the camera, but doesn't move the film. So we can take another image, and I presume if we do it again the same thing will happen. It won't move the film, but will allow us to take multiple exposures. Looking through the viewfinder, when we're in automatic, the camera is essentially an aperture priority camera. So when we change our aperture, the camera responds by setting the correct shutter speed. If we go into manual mode, then basically the camera recommends a shutter speed in the viewfinder on the right hand side where the shutter speeds are, dependent on what aperture we choose, and then we have to manually input that into our dial. So there's manual mode. So it's a metered manual mode really. We just have to input that shutter speed into the dial there. On the other side, we have on the right left-hand corner here a button that we can press to show that our batteries are good, and if they are, the light will light up. And then to dial in our film speed, we press the button here on the top and then rotate the dial to our selected film speed. And then around the same dial we do have exposure compensation of -2, +2. That's very important in this camera, as I'll explain a little bit later on. So that's pretty much the features actually of all the camera, I think. So let's just put... Now, before we put the lens on, I'll explain why exposure compensation for me is important, because when the camera was sold I was told that the light meter was inaccurate, and indeed the first film I put in was way overexposed. So the camera was overexposing in automatic mode, and so there was some confusion in my mind as to why that might be. I thought initially because I hadn't got, if you like, a proper R lens, but rather this Tamron lens, but it may be that there was some miscommunication between this lever and the camera, and it wasn't exposing correctly, or it wasn't closing down or up properly. But it turns out that the camera is indeed, the light meter isn't quite accurate. I do go into detail of my process on my blog. I'll give the address on the bottom of the screen here. But to cut a long story short, by placing the exposure compensation dial on -1, that seems to correct the overexposure of the camera. So that's really encouraging for me, so that I can go out confident that the images should come out reasonably well exposed. So there we go, that's a run through of the camera, just lining up the dots to the red line that's around the lens release, and then rotating that. And there we go, really. That's the Leica R3 MOT electronic, and that has been camera number 437.